Do you want to come
Pat,
over
this
here?
is really nice.
Yeah, I'm gonna come back
Isn't
over
it
there.
nice? Fantastic.
And then they can run the
That's
whole
Sarah
PowerPoint.
Doré. Is that Sarah Doré?
All right, you're up.
Did that.
All right, good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the May 9th Board of Selectmen's meeting. I call this meeting to order at 6:04 PM. This is the public forum. This is an opportunity for anyone who wishes to address the board this evening with anything that is not on the agenda. Seeing none. The first item will be to consider a liquor license renewal application for Musette LLC, DBA Musette Restaurant, 2 Pier Road.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. And item number 4, we're gonna have a public hearing for amendments to the traffic and parking control ordinance. So I declare this public hearing open. Lori, would you like to speak?
So the public hearing is about a change in the traffic and parking control ordinance regarding Chestnut Street. As you will see in the enclosed picture on Chestnut Street, the easterly side of Chestnut Street currently in the ordinance is designated as a fire lane. As you know, we have had an issue with parking availability at Town Hall, especially during the summer months. We are looking to change the portion between the CMP pole, J22, and the driveway of 14 Chestnut Street to allow parking similar to other areas around the town hall. That would free up, we believe, 2 parking spots. We have discussed this with the Public Works Department and Public Safety. They believe if we leave room at both driveway entrances, we could fit in 2 parking spots. We would probably have them be employee parking Monday through Friday to limit the amount of traffic in and out of there. And then it would be public parking on the weekend.
Sounds like a good plan to me. It looks like there's plenty of room.
Yeah, I
I'll make
agree.
a motion to
In
add
fact, that's usually what we
parking.
do
Go
when we're looking for a parking place.
ahead.
I said, usually that's what we do anyway,
Yeah.
is park there.
Right, so
Make it
I'll make,
legal.
And we'll make it legal.
I'll make a motion to provide new parking between CMP pole J22 and the driveway of 14 Chestnut Street.
I will second that.
And we'd be looking to make the amendments outlined here in the ordinance provisions that you have.
That's what I heard him
Okay,
say.
you can add that to my
Okay.
motion.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? So moved.
So while I'm on that same subject matter, if you go to the last picture at the end of the town office, where you see an SUV parked there, currently we park 3 vehicles in a row at the very end of town hall. We are looking at the possibility of making diagonal parking in there. Public Safety and Public Works believes we would have enough room to have diagonal parking and then enough room for people to go around on Chestnut Street. We're not looking to make any changes to traffic flow there, either one way or eliminate what's currently there, but I just wanted to make you aware of that as well. And we would see how that works.
How many do you think you can get in there?
At least 4, I would think. We get 4,
Yes. 4, okay.
So we'd,
double it.
yeah, so we'd actually gain 4 parking spots. That's good. Yeah, I'm all in
Alright.
favor.
2 at the fire lane and 2 there.
Yeah.
2 and 2.
Yeah, right. Does that take us separate?
It doesn't take any action, I just wanted to make you aware of
Yeah.
that part.
Okay. Do you have anything else to come before the public hearing? Anyone else have anything to come before this public hearing? Hearing none, I declare this public hearing closed. Number 5, we'll have a public hearing for the waterfront and the street ordinance. I'll open the public hearing. First order of business is our waterfront ordinance. Chris Mayo, our Cape Porpoise Harbor Master. I think we gotta get you a Kennebunkport sweatshirt.
Bring them on.
Okay.
Good evening. So in front of you is a very basic ordinance change that addresses renewal process for the waiting list. The purpose of this ordinance change is very simple from a bookkeeping standpoint. It forces folks who are interested in moorage in Kennebunkport to renew their interest annually through the waiting list application process, similar to a mooring permit renewal
So how would you keep that, so say you're keeping a list. How would you keep the names? Would it, so say I came in on May 1st,
Sure.
and I was 25th last year on the list, but I come in with May 1st, I'm the first one to take out the new, for the year.
Right.
Do I go bumped up to
Nope,
first
so,
place?
you retain your.
Just checking.
You retain your chronological standing from your initial application date.
Okay,
So say on May 21st, 2019, you come in, fill out a waiting list application. For subsequent renewals, that's going to be your date, as long as you meet the renewal criteria.
okay. And if somebody doesn't come in, if everything get kind of bumped up?
Yeah, so if people don't renew, or folks on the existing current waiting list aren't interested anymore, we won't receive a renewal form from them. We'll chase them down, make sure that they really didn't want to renew, and then those folks will be off the list. Folks below them will move up. If somebody says, well, I don't want one, I don't want to be on the waiting list, 2 years later they apply, that's their new date. They don't retain chronological
they've
order
skipped a
forever. You
year.
have to
Yeah.
be current.
Okay.
Are we gonna charge a fee, Chris, for the initial application?
At this point, the peer committee, as well as other folks that were in on getting this ordinance provision changed through, didn't feel that a fee for the waiting list was necessary right now.
Fair enough. All right, thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
Actually, any other questions from the board?
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. And the street ordinance.
We have to come out of public hearing.
No, we don't, we're still in public. Jay, our fire
sorry.
chief, Jay Everett, to speak about our street ordinance.
The changes were brought about when we applied what the ordinance was to looking at renumbering down at Kings Highway and some other places in town. And we found that it actually caused more issues than it should have, so we're just changing some language. The other thing that was changed in there is there's a little bit different on the enforcement part, sending a letter and then a fine as well if they don't put their numbers up. And it already had in it what the numbers should be, the size and all that good stuff. But that was basically the changes. And a little bit on renaming properties where it was 3 houses or more on a right-of-way had to be named. We moved it to 2 properties may be named, because it just helps us find it, the public safety find the addresses that much faster.
Any questions from the board or from the public? Thank you, Jay.
Yep.
Hearing none, I will close this ordinance. We don't need to vote because this will be on the warrant in June. Okay, number 6, authorize commitment of sewer user rates. Chris Simeoni from the Public Works Department.
So just as a follow-up, the user fee for last year was $456. The new budget results in an increase of 2.55% or $11.62 on the sewer user fee. So the proposed user fee for fiscal year '20 will be $467.62.
Can you repeat that again?
Sure. So the user fee for 2019 was $456. The proposed budget for this year was an increase of 2.55%, which resulted in an increase of $11.62 per user fee. So the user fee proposed for fiscal year '20 is $467.62.
And is this because of your bond or because of equipment?
No, it is because of the budget. We had some changes in the operating budget. The bond payment isn't gonna take effect until fiscal year '21.
If you've been here last time, you know.
No, I did know, I was just asking questions.
All right, thank you, Chris. Do I have a motion?
Motion to accept the commitment?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, Chris.
Us with multiple bathrooms have a hard time with these kind of increases.
Yes. Number 7, presentation by Nina Perlmutter on Kennebunkport as an arboretum. You got your PowerPoint up and running, Nina? Okay. All right, get your popcorn and sit back.
More importantly, my water. I have a cold, so let me know if you can't hear me. Can you see?
Patrick?
Oh. I was looking up there and
I'll bet.
back up a little more. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you.
All right. I'll try to go fast. I'm not going to read everything on the slides because you don't
Good,
need to
thank
know
you.
it all. Okay, you can read it for yourself. This came about with the Shade Tree Committee and also my work on the Planning Committee. And, you know, we've been talking a long time about what we can do to help people to understand the trees in town. Shade Tree Committee members get a lot of questions when they hold tables at election time and so forth about trees. What can I do about this one? What's a good tree to do, you know, to put here, and what's a good tree to put there? And on top of that, we've been noticing that people don't know what to do with trees. Mostly they cut them down. Developers love to cut them down. And as I see more and more enlarged houses, I don't want to say mansionization, but go in town, and I see more subdivisions, I'm beginning to get concerned, and so are other people, basically, about what's happening to the trees in town. Do people really understand what trees do for them? And so I wanted to compare a little bit, and I just wanted to go through a couple of interesting, some information, some studies that have been done on trees, a little bit about trees, and then bring this to the point what the Shade Tree Committee wants to do with an arboretum, and what kind of system we're looking at setting up for this particular arboretum. So if I could have, you know, the U.S. is not the only place, but the numbers are the U.S. is losing something like 36 million urban trees a year. This is not even counting all the forests that are being cut down all over the world. And just to compare, if you look at aerial shots of my old hometown, Revere, which is a suburb of Boston, and Kennebunkport, you know, you can see what happens as urbanization happens. You know, Boston is just to the south of Revere. Logan Airport's right to the south and right on there. Kennebunkport looks like it's wonderfully forested. You can barely see a house in there or any kind of development. But in reality, what's happening, if you look closer, you know, I can give you a couple of examples just on Lock Street and West Street. Yeah. The top left picture, can I use a laser pointer on this?
Sure.
Go for it.
Yeah, oh, okay. The top left picture here is a 1-acre plot right next to my drive that was treed. It's in winter, so you don't see the tops of the trees very well. But mostly that was covered by trees. You know, it was sold a couple of years ago, and a very large house was put on that 1-acre plot, probably about as big as you can get on a 1-acre plot in Kennebunkport. And you can see how many trees have been taken down around it. And the people who come in, they don't understand. They haven't replanted trees. There are a couple little blue spruce in there they threw in. Mostly they put in lawn. Again, on West Street here are a couple of tagged maples that are on the tree viewer. And this was Rebecca Eaton's old house. And she sold it. And you can see there are trees basically all around on this plot. They moved things around. They remodeled the house. It's very beautiful now. I think it looks very nice, the couple that moved in. But can you see, other than the 2 maples, can you see a tree on that plot? No. People put in lawns. And lawns are one of the most sterile things you can put in. They don't absorb water during flooding times. They dry out in the summer. And they don't leave very much for wildlife. I've had comments now from people after I've given this talk about You know, my neighbors complain to other neighbors, not directly to me, about why don't I take down the brush and the shrubs and so forth on my plot and neaten it up. What they mean is, why don't I cut down everything and put in a nice lawn? They don't understand. People coming in don't understand. A lot of the residents don't understand the value of trees. You have to go back one. Okay. And what does this mean for us, basically? Okay? There are a lot of things you lose when you lose trees. Okay? It's not just the loss of connection to nature. And people are losing a connection to nature. I mean, my husband walked into a store the other day, and he bought something, and the salesperson said, "Do you want a bag?" And he said, "No, let's save a tree." And she said, "What trees?" You know, they don't make the connection. People cannot tell you where their products come from. You can't determine, most people in this room probably can't tell you where the lithium in your computer batteries come from, let alone where, you know, your food products come from today. We're losing the connection to nature. You lose trees, you lose that, you lose oxygen in the atmosphere, you increase carbon dioxide, go through that whole list, okay? But let's just take one, okay? And this is a really powerful one. This is an important point. Trees are incredibly important to our lives because basically they produce the oxygen we breathe, and people do not understand that. You know how important it is to have trees around you, not just shrubs, not just lawn. They go through the process in their leaves of photosynthesis, and they take up carbon dioxide, something that's way too abundant in our atmosphere. They combine it, they split a water molecule, and they combine those hydrogens in there and make a sugar molecule with an input of solar energy. They make an energy-rich molecule, and their waste product is oxygen gas. Most of our oxygen in the atmosphere is at about 21%, and it comes from freshwater and marine phytoplankton. Those are little one-celled creatures that photosynthesize. And that's because 2/3 of the earth is covered with water. The rest of our oxygen, though, pretty much comes from trees. A lot of it comes from the rainforest, a lot of it. But it also comes from trees in the northern hemisphere and the big forests that we have up in Canada and in Maine. Maine is one of the most treed states in the United States. And the reason for that, if you look at a tree, is the volume. Look at the space it takes up on the surface of the earth, and look at the volume of photosynthetic material there. It produces an amazing amount of oxygen, more than any shrub, more than any grass. Consider the same surface area covered by grass, so you're going to get much oxygen off that. That's why they're so important. That's what people don't understand. The other thing people don't understand is the minute that oxygen level falls to 19.5%, we're going to have trouble breathing. It's really very critical. Trees, of course, are homes to all sorts of animals. The raccoon that goes to my feeder all the time and empties it, birds, you know, as well as insects, microbes. There's a whole biome in trees. And everything that lives around trees, including the mink that got caught in my garage. Getting rid of that one was a trick. And, you know, and trees produce a lot of nutrients for other organisms. Carbon sequestration is an important part of it. Rotting leaves allow for flowering plants. There's a whole system of fungal hyphae under the soils and through trees that allow them to communicate, but also they allow them to move chemicals back and forth, and they help to break down the trees when they're dead and dying. Whether they're dead, these are the fruiting bodies of all those fungi whose hyphae you don't see. And mosses and lichens, this is a lichen called British soldier and so forth, depend on trees and depend on soils and depend on a lot of that nutrient. And then there's flowering plants that don't even photosynthesize anymore, that live off the fungal hyphae, that live off the roots of the trees. Dead trees can be just as important as living trees. This is one that's right next to my house. Every arborist that comes out says it's time to take that down. The bark is sloughing off around it. But, you know, every time I look out there in the spring, especially on a branch like this, if you hit that, the video should go on. I see something like a pileated woodpecker. You know, dead trees are very important to woodpeckers and nuthatches. This guy took about 10 minutes to make that hole. They're really amazing. So, in order to teach people about trees, what Shade Tree Committee has discussed, what can we do? What can we do to get information out there? Okay? And we thought about an arboretum. An arboretum is nothing but a botanical garden devoted to trees. It's a garden of trees. Okay? There are loads of them around the world. One of the larger ones is in the Arnold Arboretum. It's right next to Boston. In fact, it's on Boston land. It was started in 1872, and it comprises 281 acres, which is also the size of the city of Boston right next to it. The Longfellow Arboretum in Portland, Maine is much newer. It's only 2.5 acres, and it was started in 1976. There are all kinds of arboretums around. They're used for research, they're used for teaching. They're very valuable. There's Pat, helping students. Okay?
You're a star.
The problem with an arboretum is it's like a museum or a botanical garden. You have to get people to it. And we thought about ways that we could get near the town center a piece of land that could give us an arboretum for a teaching tool. And then finally, as I looked at things and I looked at what was happening with urbanization, and read up on various types of arboretum and walks through town, we finally came to the conclusion that why not make the town into an arboretum? And that changes the whole perspective, okay? It acknowledges our special trees. It makes them very important to the town. It helps you to understand the town as an ecosystem or an urban forest, which it really is when you have as many trees as you have in Kennebunkport, okay? You can significantly map all the significant trees and point them out to people. There are big advantages to that, okay? It engages residents as well as visitors into looking at the importance and value of trees. They see them not only in natural habitats, but with buildings around them and the uses they have in buildings in helping the heating and cooling. But one more back. But more importantly, I think the most important thing out of this, it starts to get people to think about Kennebunkport, not as a town having trees in the town, but basically you have a town in the trees. And that's a whole different ballgame when you start to think about it. You start to think about urban forests. Okay. Town arboretum can be used as a teaching tool, many different ways. Again, a town arboretum can be used for relaxation and comfort. You have spots with benches where people can sit and relax. Humans are very connected to trees and green spaces, whether they think it or not, whether they look at it or not. And I just want to point out a couple of studies. There are dozens of studies pouring in right now showing the human connection to nature, okay? That green spaces are extremely important. In Philadelphia, they have 40,000 vacant lots. And they're starting to put in some community gardens. And some of the people who are putting in those gardens took almost 550 of those lots, and they divided them into thirds. And they left a third of them vacant. They cleaned up a third of them, but didn't do anything else. And the other third, they made them green. They put in grass, they put in small trees, they put in gardens. And what they found after studying the people in those neighborhoods is, one, in some of them crime went down 10%, depression went down, people felt less stress, and people who walked by these green spaces, their blood pressure dropped.
Oh, I need that.
It made a difference. The more important study to me that I was really flabbergasted by was a Danish study that was done in February. The Danes keep a lot of information on their people. It's a small country. They have a lot of statistics. They have a lot of information about where people lived when they were children and where they live now, their socioeconomic status. They took 1 million of these people where they could get the right information, and they looked at how many of them had green childhoods, in other words, large parks and forests around, and places where they grew up as children, looking from 0 to about 12 years of age. And what they found was, regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of family history, green spaces made a big difference in the number of mental disorders there were in their adulthood. There were a lot of different mental disorders. I think schizophrenia was the least of them. But the biggest change was children who had had green spaces when they were younger had a 55% likelihood reduction of alcoholism, even if they were in urban environments later on. These things are happening. Things like forest bathing. People are going out in the forest and taking walks, and it's sort of a mindfulness. You make yourself aware of everything that's going wrong, smell the trees, use all your 5 senses. And they found that people that walk through a forest like that, and people compared to people who walk through urban environments, okay, the stress hormones go down, cortisol goes down, their immune system goes up, and their blood pressure goes down. So looking at this and thinking, what can we do to educate people, to get them back integrated with green spaces and why they're important, and to get them to understand that bushes are important, trees are important, lawns are not so important. Okay? Well, Laurie and I looked at spaces where we could put an arboretum at one time. There are 12 town-owned village parcels at that time. And the ones that were most suitable for an arboretum were really the ones that were landlocked and far away from the town center, and it just wasn't going to work. But now we have a new 84-acre parcel that I've got right there in purple. And if you look at this, and I filled it in yellow and green, the only markers I had, I filled in the spaces where I could see wetlands. And I know that that parcel has, and if you've walked it today, you know too, that parcel has about 30% wetlands. And I've mentioned this before. These are the things that developers like to hide or just stick on lots and people and say, don't touch these, MDEP will be all over you, et cetera, et cetera. But in reality, those wetlands are parts of forests. They're swamps, they're vernal pools simply meaning ephemeral, that it goes away in the summer, it dries down so you don't get fish in it. And they have a different ecology than drier areas. You're going to get different type of trees. There's going to be deciduous forest swamps. There are going to be evergreen forested swamps. They're very important for carbon sequestration. Things that go into them don't rot fast. They sit there. They take CO2 out of the atmosphere. They have their own species of plants and animals that tend to stick around them, like the spotted turtle and the spotted salamander. But also, you can see different species of plants at different levels in some of these pools and swamps. Okay, they're extremely important to animals. You have to go back one. And even though humans see them as a wasteland, what we really need to do in Kennebunkport, because we have so much wetland, is get people to see them as enriched areas, extremely important to the environment. Just like tidal marshes are the carbon source for the oceans, these can be the carbon source for forests and for a lot of the environment. And we have an opportunity in the village parcel to teach this. Now, we have a village parcel which may get developed into houses or, municipal buildings or whatever people decide to do with it. What do you do with these wetlands and these swamps? Well, if you make your town into an arboretum, You can make walkways, and you can lead people into the forest. You can take them from the urban forest into a deeper forest, into the wetlands and the swamps, and you can do it in all sorts of ways. These are just examples of easy walkways, that anyone can do. Or you can have a challenge to see who can do this with a lobster roll in their hand, whatever. People who aren't afraid of heights can go up on these rope bridges. And if you really want to show them some stuff about trees, you can make this kind of a walkway that takes them right up into the top part of the tree canopy, which has an entirely different biome. You can make any kind of walkway you want, but the idea is to reintegrate people with the natural environment. Okay, so how do we do this? Okay, how do we do this and teach people along the way that makes it easy for them, that makes visitors to Kennebunkport want to take a walk through these areas, and have a little fun? Well, you could have marathons through there, I suppose, but people who want to start doing things like forest bathing, go for forest walks and so forth, we have tagged trees. We can identify trees for them and give them information along the way. The problem is the Kennebunkport Shade Tree Viewer. This was put together as a very nice system for the Shade Tree Committee and for anybody working in forestry. But it's not being kept up. It's not owned by anybody. The public cannot access it. There are some trees on, but they can't even get the information that's on this, and it's just not up to date. This particular tree, 855, you have to go back one, was taken down in 2018, and it's still on the Shade Tree Viewer. It was diseased with Dutch elm disease. It was on beechwood. We do have a system, though. We've been talking to Bartlett Tree Company that does the treating of our elms. They're a big company, and recognizing that towns need this sort of thing in universities, they have put together a SQL database with a very large capacity. It's called Arborscope. That's their trademark. But basically, it's just a very large database, and they can put almost any kind of information into it that you want. You can make any type of report you want. You can give it different authorization levels, so that if Mike, for example, wants a report on the trees that he needs to prune on Mill Street for this year, or on North Street, he can pull down a report of that. For the schools, if you want to show the school system, how many elms there are around so you can send the kids out to take their diameter, you can pull down a report and filter it for that particular area. You can do just about anything you want to do with this database. They've set it up very nicely. It's usually maintained and updated by Bartlett, but I've been told, and the Shade Tree Committee sat through an hour-and-a-half presentation on this system, I've been told that the town could take it over if they want to. They have a way for doing that. You can also make the information public, which means that you can make any kind of report you want for anybody that you want. Let's go to the next slide. We don't need that. One of the things you can do with your trees is you can set up quick response codes or QR codes. And I think most people know about this. It's like a barcode, but you get an awful lot of information on it. The Chinese do this a lot on trees. Oh, go back. Chinese do this a lot on trees, and they put up QR codes to inform people that are walking along what kind of a tree this is. You can put in some information if you want, along with the number of the tree. You can show the leaves, and then you have your QR code. You go to your phone, and even if it's winter, you can pull up the kind of leaves you have, the kind of flowers, the history of this particular tree, how long it takes to grow that big, any kind of information. So it's a great boon for the public, for visitors, for residents who want to learn about the particular species of trees that we have. The cost, and that's what I'm working on. I got one proposal from them for Kennebunkport. The cost is per 3 years. They want a 3-year contract, and it depends on how many trees you want to do. They have option 1, option 2, option 3 there. And, you know, it's, I don't have all the details on it, but I believe that includes any kind of reports that you want. I don't know whether it includes all the authorization levels. There are additional costs, for example, they're listing a license to use at $1,500. I believe that's if the town wants to go in and manipulate the data, okay? I don't know what it would cost to have them set up the QR codes. They're not included in the database. This is meant for mostly town use, but if you want to have it for visitor and public use, you want to have the QR codes up there as well. So I've sent this proposal over to Werner, but I'm also waiting for a response from Bartlett by the person who puts this together to see whether or not we have the actual cost would be to set up this system for 3 years and see how it works for us. Now, one of the things I've talked about in the Shade Tree Committee, and we're doing also, is looking at granting agencies, because I'd like to be able to cover this with a grant. There are some USDA trail, you know, grant agencies. There are some other agencies. I think it would be more than a Project Canopy grant at this point, if you did a 3-year contract for what we want. But it's a start. It's a start for making a really good tree program in town. And if you have it, basically, you can identify trees special to Kennebunkport. You can tell people where the odd trees are in town, you know, an oak that tends to grow really funny down by the mill pond. Where special species are, like shagbark hickory. You know, if it's winter, you can show them with a QR code what the canopy looks like in summer. If it's summer, you can show them what the winter canopy looks like, the age of the tree. You can show them what the difference is between a sugar maple and a red maple, even if it isn't in season. And basically, that's where we are with the Shade Tree Committee. We're in the process of looking at the pricing on this. This is the end of my talk. I'm sure you're all happy with that. I did take out the kid.
This was amazing, fantastic.
Oh,
Nina,
thank you.
very interesting.
Yes, there's a lot more. I took out about half of the talk that I gave the other day.
Oh, no, that was good.
I promised Laurie I'd take out the kitten pictures, too.
Well, Nina, as somebody who grew up here in town and played in the woods behind my house almost every day, you made me feel good because it was good for me, apparently. And I enjoyed it very much as
It
a
was
child.
very good for you, and some of these studies that show that people grow up around forests have better nutrition. I mean, these studies are just coming in one after the other to show that green spaces are very important. This doesn't bode well for colonizing the moon. At least not with human beings.
Thank you for this. This
That
was
was
Thank you very much.
That was
really good,
Yeah.
really good.
When we talk about trees, I think many people think, oh, no, it's going to be a tree hugger, you know?
Yeah.
What are we going to do? But like Nina, I have a degree in botany, and when I changed my major in college to botany and trees and plants, it was one of the things I immediately recognized. When you're out in the Arboretum, walking around large oak trees with resurrection fern on them, there's a peaceful, easy feeling.
Yeah.
Believe it or not. And I thought, well, gee, that's nice. I like that place, and I enjoyed it. I didn't understand why. With all this additional data that's coming in now, it's apparent to me that's the benefit I was deriving at the time. You know, the village parcel is an opportunity for the Shade Tree Committee to suggest how you would like to increase diversity of trees in town so that it could be part of a walking tour for people in the future. This is planning way, way down the future. It's going to take time for the trees to grow.
Nina, was it your suggestion to use the vernal pools and the wetlands to do this? So, you know, we would have plenty of land to do other things, but the area that we cannot be built on, we could,
It's a teaching tool.
Yeah,
yeah.
set
I think that's a
aside.
great idea.
I do,
Yeah.
too.
And if you want to go further with your imagination, okay, take some of these trails. I do this at night, I think about these things. take some of these trails and get them going and start working with Arundel and connect them to the Eastern Trail so that people have a way to come down into Kennebunkport that really love trees and can enjoy Kennebunkport and vice versa.
You know, but 50 years down the road, if you walked the new village parcel with the trees in a mature state, it will be exceptionally pleasant.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's
And that's how you get there. You start with planting trees now.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Well, thank you again, Nina. All right, well, we have a few more items to cover this evening, and this one may not be as relaxing and as comfortable, but we have to tackle it anyways. Consideration of traffic measures on Jeffries Way in Goose Rocks. All right. Lori, would you like to speak to this, or?
Did you
Would you
ever
mind?
check on what's the state? Remember you said before we do anything, I have to check the state? Because it's,
So we went out there and we did our field trip visit, so
Right.
people could see it in person. And one of the questions that arose was about the right-of-way. And we did some history lessons about the adoption of Jeffries Way, and Mike and Tracy O'Rourke were very helpful. We did find that the right-of-way, the town, it is a town way, the right-of-way is probably 25 feet, is what it looks like, so it is a small right-of-way. We also have spent some time examining, you know, what the challenges are out there. I think ones that have been identified are the kayak rentals and the amount of traffic that causes and the backing up, you know, safety concerns. We have the handicap parking spot that was called into question. We have residents who, you know, have concerns they expressed, again, about public safety, about people walking there, about the bicycles, also about people backing up in their driveways, or, you know, the fact there's no turnaround.
thank you.
And, you know, whether or not some local traffic regulations could occur. So I did talk to Amy about it. You know, Amy's concern is that, you know, depends on what we want the signage and regulation to be. So there are two pieces to regulation. There's developing a regulation, and then there is enforcing a regulation. And so, in terms of developing a regulation, we can regulate it in ways similar to other town ways. If you want, so that includes parking. It is a public access point to the beach. The public has the right to have access on the road. We could limit vehicular traffic, but the question is, what vehicular traffic would you be regulating? What would be the definition of that, and how would we enforce that? So those are some considerations to give. Residents also talked about the bicycles, and, you know, there seems to be a lot of bicycle parking there, and making sure that that's not interfering. And then lastly, I've heard from the fire department, who use that access point to get to the beach in case of an emergency, and their goal is to make sure that that road is accessible and that the end is accessible, so that in an emergency, they are able to respond. So that's all the information I've gathered at this point.
Can we make a decision, or do we need
No,
more
we haven't
information?
finished discussing it, yeah.
Yeah.
But I have an idea of how I feel about it, and I'll give you my idea. I think that we should go ahead and ask the kayak company to not go down there any longer, since it's already in the ordinance. You're not supposed to have a business in the right-of-way, is that correct?
Our current ordinance says that you shouldn't be doing business in a town right away without selectmen permission.
Okay. And maybe we could do something along with maybe some better signs, but I just don't feel as though that, I don't want to lose, I feel as though we need to have the handicap parking still there, because where else are you going to move it? Well, you know, they need to be spread out. And Stuart brought that up. He thought that would be a better thing, to make sure that the parking for the handicap have they're spread out amongst between the beach from one end to the other end. And right now they are, so I wouldn't be in favor of moving that handicap parking. Those are the things I'm looking at.
Has anybody contacted the kayak company to discuss with them what their needs are? That maybe we could come up with another scenario?
I don't want to, I don't think that we should be allowing it if our ordinance says no, and the reason for that is we've had enough heartburn over the beach, and I don't think that we should start allowing against our ordinance or with special permission from this
I don't know
board.
that that's against the ordinance.
But, you know, I think the beach is a place where people go and enjoy themselves for, you know, as individuals or small groups, not a place where we conduct commerce.
No, but
We did meet with the kayak rental company last year, one of them. Bob Sherman, Richard Driver, and Chief Sanford and I met. We did throw around a lot of different ideas about other ways to accommodate, you know, people who are renting kayaks, what the consequences were. You know, the reality is that, you know, he can still deliver kayaks to, you know, residents or people who are renting homes, but we could not think of another location that wouldn't have another negative impact that he could do the rentals at. You know, if we did it on Kings Highway or some other place, you know, we're going to have some of the same similar issues. You know, if you do it on a private property, you run into some zoning challenges.
Yeah.
Because it's a commercial activity. So, it is a challenge. I think we did work hard, and Bob Sherman can speak to that, certainly that we did. He really was striving hard to find a solution, and unfortunately, we could not find one.
You couldn't find one, just because I'm in the business, there's a lot of people who truly enjoy that as part of the Kennebunkport.
You know what we
What
call
you-
kayaks?
No.
Speed bumps.
Yeah, well,
There's enough of them in the ocean, but that's not the point here. The point
Right.
is, unless this board votes to give permission for him to use it, he needs to go. He has no permission. We've heard clearly from people down there. This is a public safety. This is where the fire department has access. I'm sitting here looking at a picture down the right of way. I disagree with Alan. I think the handicap space should be moved for safety reasons. But
Closer?
that's, I'm not gonna fight you over that. No, I mean off the road itself, because people in the audience and people at home can't really see this, but you can see that the space protrudes into,
Into
it's
the
only
road.
24 feet wide.
yeah, into the
And
road.
how wide's a fire truck, Jay? 12? Yeah, that's quite a bit. And if you have people milling in and out of here, as you will in the summertime, and they're trying to get their rescue boat out there and somebody, you know, needs it, I think that's paramount here, because there are only so many access points to the ocean in the town, and especially at Goose
Well,
Rocks
you
Beach.
just have to find another compensatory
Correct,
spot.
correct. And I'm not saying we don't need to vote on that. That's beyond the scope of tonight's meeting.
Is it realistically to say, let's make it, other than the homeowners who need to be able to get in and out with
Correct.
their vehicles, make it a pedestrian only and bicycles?
I don't know if we can we do that if we wanted to?
Amy feels like you could regulate with certain parameters around it. There are certain things you can't do. But the question is, so if we're only having resident vehicular traffic, just so you know, it would become an enforcement issue, and it would be unrealistic to think that we're gonna take every person out of there.
I think it's more than we want to do. That's what I think.
I think it's too
More
late in
than
the
it can
season
do.
to do anything.
This is something that I had envisioned, you know, when we went down and looked at it, and as I look at it here on this piece of paper, that it's gonna be a phased approach, because we had somebody who thought we needed to have someone there, you know, somebody from law enforcement or
Right.
somebody in a supervisory role to maintain that, and this Stuart so eloquently said we can't do that because there are many other places in town that we could, do, could equally justify the same. So if we could agree that, we don't have to agree.
You have
because
somebody
we-
at the mic. You have,
I'm not done talking, but I will be.
I thought you were.
No. You know me, I'm never quiet. So if,
I'm just feeling a little ambivalent about stopping or preventing, like kayaks.
but he's not supposed to be there, Sheila. It's not a matter of stopping. Our
I don't,
ordinance-
and don't think of it as stopping. I mean, it's simply not this board's obligation to provide him a
No,
place
you're
to
right.
go.
Yes.
You're right.
However, it is our obligation to respond to a challenge that's being faced by the people who live there, and by, a recognized potential public safety issue. If he finds another way to do it, good on him. And if there's a way to work with the general store, with the association, with
Well, that-
some
that was
other
my thought.
entity, I think, fine. But in terms of the town, acting as an agent or promoter or engaged in any
No, that-
way
I-
in
I
finding,
just was
yeah,
trying to come up with a win-win
sure.
type of situation.
I hope he finds one. I just don't know that it's our
Yeah,
role
right, me
to
too.
seek it.
And when you see how big the vehicle and the trailer, et cetera, are on this road with a parking spot on it, it really, it doesn't belong there.
And the bicycle.
My concern
And
with
the
the
bicycle.
parking location for the disabled parking is more relative to the spacing of those spots rather than, condensing them right at Edgewood, which is a really narrow place along Kings Highway, in terms of the width of that roadway. I'm not sure that's a great idea. And I also think that, having them in a couple of locations is better for people coming to visit Goose Rocks. So while I'm not necessarily married to a disabled parking space on that stretch of the world, somewhere down there or someplace nearby, rather than having the only ones available in one location at Goose Rocks.
We could also move it further down to the end of the road so it doesn't stick out into the middle of the road.
And be closer to the water.
Be closer to the water. I think Highway could probably clean that back. If we look at this picture here, you can clearly see that there's bushes, et cetera, in the way. And I mean, maybe we don't get to it this year. We have a lot of things going on. And this has been this way for a long time, but
I don't know that moving I just gotta speak up, because moving it closer to the beach interferes with the fire access.
Oh, okay.
So I would prefer that we don't put it closer to the beach for that reason.
Well,
Okay.
one of the other things was the people who bring their kids in and drop them off, so they drive down, and then they gotta come out again. So that's a congestion of vehicles, which are getting bigger and bigger every day.
I know people don't read signs, but is there a possibility we just put down no drop off?
So, I mean, right now, we did go down and look, I mean, there is a dead-end sign at the, at the beginning of Jeffrey's Way, and there's a sign that says no parking,
Right.
fire lane along the side. So that's the two signs that are there now. We could certainly put up some additional signage.
I don't feel that anybody's gonna pay attention to that sign, it's still gonna.
Probably
drop people
not.
off. And that's gonna be a problem for enforcement. And I just don't feel that we have that type of manpower to be able to stick somebody down there 24 hours a day, or 12 hours a day, or whatever. I just think it's,
Well, that's a
Beyond the scope.
non-starter.
Yeah,
That's a
we
non-starter.
know we don't have that. You're absolutely right, Alan.
What's the right answer, Lori?
Go back in time.
Yeah.
well, when I was growing up, right, there was
Pat,
no
do
cars.
you want to speak? Paul?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
quick,
yes, absolutely.
Paul Hogan, 324 Kings Highway. Just some random thoughts. There are several vendors, not just one. The one who's there most often has that really big vehicle and trailer, but other people have caught on that this is a good opportunity, a good business opportunity. So last summer, there were two others that did some dropping, not as regular. The guy who drops isn't even a Maine licensed. His vehicles are from Florida. I feel like before we want to extend ourselves to somebody, he ought to be in business here.
I know he's here part of the year, but I don't know that he's not paying any taxes to Kennebunkport
Well, as
for the
of today,
license.
as far as I'm concerned, he's not to be down there because
Right.
he has no permission and.
Yeah, I understand.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, but I hear you.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. Would it be possible, I know, the summer starts in a few weeks, but I saw that you were hiring somebody to sell parking, to be at the police station. Maybe there could be, the person who sells the parking tickets could be in that spot, like many beach badges, locations. You have somebody at that place serving a dual purpose. He's selling, he or she is selling parking decals and preventing the onflow of traffic. While the van,
You'd ever want to backed up traffic, I'm afraid.
well, I do believe that if you limited the drop-off, which is worse of a problem in my view than the kayaks, because everybody gets their biggest Suburban to be the one to go down there and drop the 19 kids off and the 16 chairs and the whatever. So those vehicles are huge too, that back up, and, it's crazy to watch. But I do think you would need an alternate drop spot. When the beach committee considered this years ago, we talked about taking a few spots on Kings Highway and turning them into a drop spot and adding 2 parking spaces up on New Bedford Road to maintain the same number of parking spots. We had one objection. He wrote a letter to Lori. He since wrote another letter saying he didn't really understand, and he withdrew his objection. This is for someone who was on the beach. He said he viewed it at that point as increasing the parking. And we talked to him afterwards, and he understood that it really wasn't increasing a parking space. It was just providing a temporary drop spot.
Off the road.
Off the road. Well, you have parking.
Exactly, right.
It would have
But
to be
the
on either side.
So they're not preventing traffic from
Right,
flowing.
right. You have a 5-minute drop or something like that. That would be ideal in front of one of those houses there. I had,
That I can see.
and, the trust has made, and we've built racks for the trust, and they've encouraged people to use the racks for kayaks on the trust properties, and the town could do the same thing in that location and make, these were just, we had scrap metal and we just, plopped them in, took them out at the end of the summer, but, and, put up some signage and steered people to put them there. And so that would be a much better solution. Right now, the beach agreement says if you're going to put, your property on somebody else's property, you need permission. And the current situation encourages everybody to dump their kayaks in front of those 2 people who were great neighbors to go into the beach agreement, and they get terrible abuse. They can't even sit near their properties because there are dozens of kayaks on either side. They're very nice people. They haven't really complained, but I know they're not happy. I know both of them. So moving the kayaks to a better location where there is space would be a good idea. And everybody takes their kayaks. Residents don't have this luxury of having concierge service. Those of us who live at the beach, we either have to drag them or carry them or wheels. Everybody has solutions, and the concierge service is special. There's no reason why the kayak guy couldn't drop your kayak at Edgewood and give you wheels that you return at the end of the week. And you wheel it and park it at, an appropriate place. And, if the trust lets you leave it there overnight and you're comfortable doing that, do it. That's what people do. A lot of people take them back every night. Residents who don't want their property sitting out on the beach. Other people ask beachfront owners if they could, store them there. I think that was about it.
Thanks, Paul.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul.
When we lived in Newport Beach, kayaks were available for rental, and the company would come and deliver your kayak to your door with the wheels. And you could take your kayak then over to on Balboa Island, take it out to the waterfront in Newport Beach, kayak around. you bring it back, you put it on the wheels, and then you took it and you parked it in your driveway again so he could pick it up the next day. The point is that the kayak guy is never delivering things to the beach itself, he delivers it to the user. In fact, we rent a house at Goose Rocks, and it's exactly what happened last year. Even though a guy was on the ocean front, still came, dropped it at the front, took it in, used it, put it back, picked it up again. So, I mean, there's a way to conduct business. I don't want to put the kayak guy out of business, and I don't want to deprive people from not having the opportunity to get it. But that's how I've seen it handled elsewhere, and it worked pretty well. So should you decide to do something like that, I just encourage it as a possibility. Okay? Thank you.
Great, thanks, Bob.
Yeah, Bob. Well, this is obviously, as we knew, a morass, a complicated
Take that
subject,
home with you.
to say the least.
I think there's an answer out there. I just think that.
Oh,
you
I'm
know,
sure there is.
It's not really, you know, I think that between the vendors and the people who want them, there's gonna be some answer. And
So-
it isn't necessarily it isn't Jeffrey's Way.
No. Do we believe that the kayak guy is unloading the kayaks there and then they're taking them as a group out into the ocean, having tours like they do in Cape Porpoise, then coming back, or he's dropping them off for people who are staying
know.
at the beach?
I think it's a mix of things.
Paul, do you know?
Yeah.
Would you please enlighten us, because I'd like to know.
This is my beach access, so I see him all the time. The guy who does the big business, he just drops and drives away. He doesn't have a tour
And-
service. Other people do, but not him.
How does he know who's renting them?
It's all arranged online probably, and he meets them there at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whatever he does. He sometimes is there, a bunch of times. So people have made the reservation ahead of time.
Oh, I see, and then they meet him
They
at
meet him,
10 o'clock.
yeah.
So where do they park?
See, if I were him, I'd put them all on a boat and come in and moor right offshore and bring them in that way.
Read about that way.
That's the inventive
Well,
thinking we
other
love.
than enforcing the ordinance that we have about conducting business on town property, is there anything else anyone like
I
to
don't
see?
know whether you can put any better signs down there or not. I mean, you just can't police it, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, you can put all the signs down there.
Correct.
The other day.
But some people will read them and do what it says, and most of them won't. Human nature.
I mean, certainly we could sit here all night
But
and
we
talk
can
this
go ahead.
around in
Well,
circles.
we already have it figured out that the kayaker can't use the right of way any longer.
He and the
So I
others.
think
that-
basically, that's
yes.
basically all we're gonna be able to do tonight. Other than the fact, if you wanna put more signs down there.
Stu, do you look like you had something to say?
No.
No?
What is it you need for us to do right now to make something meaningful of this conversation?
I just want clarification on what direction, if any, you would like us to take at this point. So certainly, we can communicate that to all the kayak companies if that is an agreement. In regards to signage, we could put some additional signage up. I guess I'd like clarification on what, not necessarily the verbiage, but what's the message I'm communicating?
Well, if the only action we're taking is to prohibit the commercial drop-off of kayaks from that area, perhaps the messaging should simply be no commercial pickup or drop-off of rental equipment at this location or on this right-of-way, and leave it at that, because we're not precluding any other access to that space unless I'm mistaken or missing
No,
something.
we could look into, actually, Paul's suggestion about maybe the drop-off is at the top of the street, and then the kids can walk their chairs.
Hey, if that works, great. I
Yeah.
mean, whatever the answer there
Weren't we
is.
But
talking
we can't do
about-
it this year. It's-
No.
it-
Yeah, I'm just trying to get to whatever the answer is for this thing
Right.
right
Yeah,
now.
I think
But
it's
I
the
think there are
kayak
answers, like I
thing.
said,
Yeah.
I'm sure there are answers out there, I'm sure there are really good ones. I still like my boat idea, but,
Well,
I do too, Clever.
maybe somebody's listening.
Well, if the environmentalists are so hell-bent on putting me out of business, maybe I'll rent him my boat, and we could fit them all in my lobster boat and take them down there.
That's true.
so. Is that what you need?
So-
You good?
Is that,
Or,
is that good?
So
think
for
it's
right
great.
now, I'm gonna focus on the kayak rentals.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
On Jeffrey.
or any commercial pickup
And that
and
could
drop off of
eliminate
rental equipment?
Part of that congestion,
Okay.
or a lot of that congestion.
you know, I don't know, I mean, if there's some language that doesn't zero into one industry, so that some
Yeah,
other
I
industry.
hear you. No
Yeah.
rentals, no boogie boards,
Right.
no inner tubes, no hot dogs.
Yep, and since that's our ordinance, we need to take no votes or action, unless anybody has anything else, I think we'll move on.
What, is this other business?
Other, what,
Not
yes, well, we're getting there, but, yes, number 9, other business, Stuart.
I have nothing to add this evening.
Al?
Nothing.
I see Pat.
Yes, I do.
Please.
I want to let everyone at home know that the Kennebunkport Heritage Housing Trust has set up a website, and you can find out a lot of good information simply by going to khht.org. And it's an interactive site, and you can get a lot of questions answered. Thank you.
Wait.
This is
Sheila?
a fantastic piece, by the
Yes.
way. Really nicely done.
Nicely done. I'm good.
Lori, do you have other business?
I do not.
All right, I would just like to thank the Kennebunkport Side Rotary. Last night, they held a very nice event at the Nonantum, whereby they honored people who have volunteered in various capacities in the town over many years, and they thought that it was a good idea to recognize them for their service, and it was a very nice event. It was well-attended, and I'd just like to thank them on behalf of the town of Kennebunkport for doing that. You know, people who serve, including us, you know, here, we do it because we want to, not because we wish to be recognized, but it is nice that, you know, people take the time to, you know, recognize the contributions that many members of our community make to our community. This is one of the things that makes Kennebunkport special. You know, I say that often to people, and as I say often here, I am a native of the town, and it's always been that way, and it's nice to see that it continues to be that way. You know, that's what makes us a great community. It isn't the real estate.
And if there are more people out there who want to volunteer, we're happy to have you.
Yes, of course, and we've seen that this year in many of the, when we've called for people to volunteer, we've had tremendous response to that. So, again, thank you to the Kennebunkport Side Rotary. At this time, we need
the
to
warrant?
approve the warrants. I have a motion.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
And I
Okay.
just want to note that Arlene pointed out, it shouldn't say April 25th warrant, it should say May 9th. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay,
Oh, it's,
yeah.
okay.
And,
Here's the warrant.
yes, and here they are. We are going to go into executive session this evening as per MSRSA number 1, subsection 405-6A, to discuss personnel matters, and we will not be reconvening this evening. So thank you very much for coming out.